morning's SBA loan program, and we're going to get kicked off here in just a few minutes with our presenter and our guest from SBA. First, I want to just ask if you do have questions today to please post those in the chat, and I will be addressing those when Marcia takes a pause in her presentation. So just be patient with some of those questions, as and also at the end of today's presentation, we will be sending you the recorded link to today's presentation. So Chris, if you could hit the record button so we have today's session recorded. And we will also be sending you the link to today's slide deck. So with that, I want to get started and ask our guest, Sonia Smith and Kim Stout, to say a few words from our Philadelphia SBA office.
Sure. Good morning, Ernie. Thank you very much for having us this morning. Throughout the last couple of weeks, we've been appreciative of the partnership that we have with our SBDCs to get this information out to our small businesses. Both Sonia and I are here to help Marcia and answer any questions that you may have, and we'll continue to work in getting these loan programs out to our small businesses so that they could hopefully start the recovery process as soon as possible. Sonia, do you have anything to say?
No, I think you've done a good job summarizing, and I think the audience is really interested in hearing about the programs.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and also assisting Marcia is Chris Walk. He is our IT director. He will be saying a few words at the end of today's session about cybersecurity and scams to be on the lookout for. With that, I want to turn it right over to Marcia McGavis, who is our PASBDC Director of Capital Acquisition. And Marcia brings over 30 years of commercial SBA lending experience. So she has been working with this program and with our SBA partners extensively over the last 2 weeks. So take it away.
Thanks, Ernie. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, and what I've been doing is starting these sessions by just saying, be patient. SBA is totally overwhelmed by questions from both borrowers, lenders. They are working a lot of hours, let me tell you. And it's, I know there have been some glitches here and there, and, there's some frustration in terms of the timing and stuff. We understand the loan proceeds are starting to be distributed, and some of the, the advances under the EIDL program, under the EIDL advance. But please be patient with them. They've had a tough job, and the SBA, the website, the system that they needed to use was never designed for the kind of volume that they are seeing. Now, this is probably stale dated information at this point, but as of yesterday, we were told there were over 2 million EIDL applications, and in excess of 250-some thousand PPP applications. So that system was not designed for that. So you need to be patient. This all had to happen very quickly. And for them to get their arms around it, there are still questions that are coming up, and they have been diligent in getting answers for us when we've needed them and for the borrowers. So we would just ask your patience. They are doing their very best. They're doing a fantastic job. As Ernie said, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and what it has taken for the people at SBA to get this done, I just can't even imagine what they've dealt with. This is the PASBDC. If you go to that website, you can find information on both of the programs. The recording is there as well. We usually keep the most recent recording there for you to go back if you missed something or didn't quite understand something. Next, please, Chris. These are our services in general. Not going to spend time on this. That's not why you're on the call today, but just realize we can help not only startups, we can help businesses that are looking to grow, and also even businesses sometimes we can help that have gotten themselves into some trouble. So, just keep in mind, there's lots more that we do than just helping you find money. Next, please. There are 2 offices for SBA in Pennsylvania. One of them being the Philadelphia District Office. That's where Kim and Sonia are based out of. In King of Prussia, there's the contact information for that office. And then the next slide, we also have an office in Western Pennsylvania that is in Pittsburgh. Next, oh, there you go. That was the contact information for Western Pennsylvania. So wherever you know. This is a map of all of our SBD centers across the state. As you can see, there are 16 of them, and they each cover a number of counties. So wherever you're located in whatever county, you'd be associated with that particular SBDC. We are out there ready, willing, and able to give you assistance in gathering information and you know, putting things together, whatever the lenders are requiring. Next slide, please. This is the contact information for all of those centers. What I would also say is it is on, you can find the various centers and the contact information on the PA SBDC website as well. Next, please. These are the things we're going to talk about, and talking about, you know, who can help you. So we're going to talk about who's eligible for each program and what you need to have in hand, which isn't much anymore for the application. They've really streamlined the application process. And then understanding the realistic timelines. You heard me just say they've had several million applications, so you need to be patient. And then kind of estimating your loss, although SBA is the one primarily doing that, but you can give them some guidance, and certainly you will have the opportunity to speak with a loan officer. If you don't agree with the amount you're approved for, I mean, somebody will be in touch with you via either email or phone. And then as far as assistance, as I mentioned, SBA is out there. We're trying our best to help them to, you know, to answer questions and help borrowers as well. And then you have CEDOs, Certified Economic Development Organizations, DCED, which is State Economic Development, Women's Business Centers, and SCORE, veterans organizations, chambers of commerce are all out there ready, willing, and able. Next, please. So we're going to start with the EIDL program. And then after that, we'll talk about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection, I still can't say it, program. So there are some very distinct features between the 2 programs. At the very end is a comparison of the 2 programs. So it really does help to keep them straight, because I've found that over the past week or so, I get questions, you know, where I can tell they're mixing up the 2 programs. So they are very different programs. So for EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, it's a loan of up to $2 million for a period of up to 30 years as determined by SBA. For the for-profit businesses, the interest rate is 3.75%. Nonprofit businesses are at 2.75%. And we're telling people that even if you're not certain you're going to need the money, apply for it. You don't need to take it. If you don't need it, you have 6 months to make that determination. And with the EIDL program in particular, you want to apply for it because even if you get turned down for the loan, there is an up to $10,000 advance that they make within, supposed to be, we originally were saying within 3 days, but it's taking longer than that. So you know that if you apply, you give them you'll see it on the application, you'll give them a bank account number, and they will deposit whatever the advance ends up being. It's roughly based, we just had guidance actually overnight again. It's up to approximately $1,000 per employee is how they're calculating that. Credit score is infinitely important. I can't stress that enough. They're going to look at your credit score. If you have a block on anybody pulling your credit report, you need to take that off. And also, you should be aware of what your credit score is in case you're contacted by somebody. If there is derogatory information on the credit report, you should be able to address it. I usually suggest something like Credit Karma, something like that. Check it, know what's on there, and be prepared to discuss it. There are sometimes extenuating circumstances that affect your credit report, and you should be able to address those. And we do understand that the number they're looking at is pretty low. So they're being very generous in who is getting approved based on, the credit score. You will not be asked about a loan amount. They're going to do the calculation. And, if you do have a business that has a gross margin, they're probably going to use some formula based off of that. We had been saying, and I don't know if this is still true or not, that they're taking the gross margin, dividing it by 12 and multiplying it by 6. So roughly 50% of your gross margin. But if you're a sole proprietor, obviously that doesn't apply. So they're going to look at something like, if there are actual wages, if they're going to look at the net profit of the business and do some calculations that way. Like I said, this is, it's a case where you can go back to them. Next slide, please. They're not asking for any documentation up front right now. I don't know, Sonia, or have you had any guidance? Have they come back and asked people for documents at this point?
We're not aware of anything like that. No one has, advised us
Okay.
that customers are coming back.
Okay. No, I thought maybe the loan officers were getting in touch and asking for some additional documentation under EIDL. I haven't heard anything. That was the only thing. So we don't, at this point really don't know. As you can imagine, things are moving rather quickly. If you are approved for the loan and you take the loan, you must be sure to thoroughly document how you are using those proceeds. That's important. Even for the advance must be used for eligible purposes. And we're going to get into what those eligible purposes are as we move through these slides. So that is just, I'm going to emphasize that a number of times, because that's the one thing that in all the years I've been doing this, that is a real hot button with SBA. Next slide, please. This is our administrator. She's the one at the top of the house, pushing the information down and giving the directives and deciding, the fine detail of this program. So basically all states, all counties are now eligible. That happened quite a number of weeks ago at this point. It seems like an eternity at this point, but it's only, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. So for every EIDL loan, every economic injury disaster loan, there is a 1-year deferment provided on that loan. That means that you won't have a payment for the full first year. Interest will accrue, however, on it. So keep that in mind. There is also an automatic deferment for all previous disaster loans for both homeowners and businesses through the end of 2020. Now they're talking the bottom slide, the bottom point of the 6-month deferment. There's actually a 6-month payment being made, 6 months of payments being made on 7A loans, 504 loans, micro loans made by the SBA. So keep in mind, if you have already, I know those first payments have started on the 504 loans. I know it was April 1st, and I believe the ones for the 7A loans, I believe, was sometime towards the end of March. So if you have your payment on auto debit, you need to notify your lender to take it off of auto debit. You can make a determination of whether you want that payment back or you want it applied to the loan anyhow, because that needs to be at your option. The other thing that is, I don't think is in the slides, is there is going to be an automatic deferment on all new SBA loans of, I think that's 3 months. I don't think it's the 6 months. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So they're doing everything they can to make sure that, you can get through this and not be burdened with a lot of payments until we get on the other side of some of this. Next, please. What businesses are eligible for these? And this is a working capital loan. And we're going to get, like I said, we'll get into that detail. But anyhow, the small businesses are eligible, small agricultural cooperatives are eligible, small aquaculture businesses are eligible. So not ag, not farms, not somebody, as Sonia said a few days ago on this. It's if they raise livestock or grow crops, they're not eligible. But if they are doing something like producing cheese, I have the example I use is I had a farmer one time who was decided to start producing feed for livestock. So those would be eligible. And then most nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations are eligible. These are private nonprofits, by the way, no government nonprofits. So this is a first I've seen where the SBA allows churches, but as you can imagine, the churches are suffering because they can't gather in one place right now. So, and then as we said, these are working capital loans. This is to keep your business afloat by paying bills that you would have otherwise been able to pay had this not happened. Next slide, please.
Marsha, also owners of rental property are eligible.
Yes, yes. So you can qualify for up to $2 million at a rate, if you are a for-profit business, 3.75%, nonprofits are 2.75% for up to 30 years. They are working capital loans. And you know, things like, I think, well, it's down below, here it is. You can pay your fixed debts. So if you have other loans other than government-backed loans, that you can't make payments on other federal loans with this money because you can't use federal loans to pay them. It's just not allowed. But your other commercial loans, mortgages, rent, any fixed, you know, accounts payable, any payroll, utility bills, as I said, had the disaster not occurred, things you would have been able to pay. So, that's what it's designed for. I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it a few more times. Document how you're using these loans. You may be asked at some point to produce that evidence to show that you have appropriately used those funds. And so what I'm suggesting are things like, you know, if you have payroll, you have a payroll record, and then you can show proof of the payment. Keep that all together in a file so that if you're asked to produce that evidence, you will be able to do it. These loans are not intended to replace lost sales or profits or for expansion. I've had a number of people ask me, gee, can I use this to improve my website? No, it's for working capital to keep the business afloat. Next slide, please. We already talked about the advance. It's up to $10,000 that you should have. I don't know if it's changed as of, it was taking about a week, I think, for these to start to show up, but I don't know if that's changed. I know they were working hard, bringing on extra people to try and get through the mountain of loan applications they've had. So if you actually had already applied prior to the 30th in order to be eligible for the advance, you'd have to go back in and resubmit an application. And the application, if you did do it prior to the 30th, and you see what the application looks like now, as you will see in a minute, it's a very, very simple process. Shouldn't take you more than a half an hour to fill out this application. Who is eligible for an EIDL advance? If you're eligible to apply for the loan, you'd be eligible for the advance. Next slide, please. Same thing here. I just said it. You can pay fixed debts, payroll. The advance is for the same purposes as the EIDL loan. If you later get the loan, you need to document. And again, not intended to replace lost sales, profits, or for expansion. And there is no repayment on the advance, even if your application is later declined, or even if you apply, decide, and they approve you and decide not to take it, you won't need to repay the advance. Next, please, Chris. How are they different? These loans are approved by SBA and the funds come directly from the US Treasury. So you don't go to a bank to apply for this. You're gonna go, this goes directly to the SBA. You're gonna go right to the SBA website. There is the link right to it. It'll take you to the application. Even if you just go in through sba.gov, if that's what you remember, it's very easy to navigate to the actual application. So, you know, it's a very easy process at this point. There's no obligation to take the loan if it's offered. Collateral is only required for loans in excess of $25,000. Below that, there are no personal guarantees and no collateral. As a matter of fact, collateral are over $25,000, they will take a UCC filing on just the business assets, no real estate, no personal assets, no personal guarantees. And there are no personal guarantees until you go over $200,000. So up to $200,000, they're not even requiring personal guarantees. Again, something I've never seen. So it's interesting. You can also already have an SBA disaster loan for another reason and still qualify for the EIDL loan. It's just they can't consolidate them. You would have 2 separate payments. Next, please. So we already talked about this. If the primary business is farming, they are not eligible under this program. I do understand there is other assistance out there for the farmers. And they have made them eligible now under the next one we'll talk about, but they are not eligible for the EIDL loans, just ag-related businesses. Businesses involved in any illegal activity on a federal level are not eligible. Think marijuana, that is still illegal at a federal level, so they would not be eligible. Businesses whose primary purpose is gambling, like casinos and racetracks, are not eligible. And any business that derives more than 1/3 of their annual gross revenue from legal gambling activities are not eligible. Think Pennsylvania lottery. Typically, though, I haven't seen any in recent years where their lottery sales are more than 1/3 of their gross revenue. Next slide, please.
Marcia, just take a quick minute here to ask Mr. Chen's question in the YouTube channel. This may be for Sonia to address. We are in construction business. Can we get the PPP loan in 2 time periods or segments to benefit the forgiveness? For example, 40% of the employees are currently working, but 60% have been furloughed since March 21st, but they're going to bring them back by June 30th.
You want to, one of you guys want to address, one of you two want to address that one?
The EIDL is both for maintaining your workforce and bringing people back that you had to lay off. And we're not even talking about the PPP yet. So maybe we will have more clarity once we go over that. Right now, this is the EIDL loan program.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, in this program, this goes for a much longer period of time. So this is from February 15th through the end of the year. So in some cases, and we'll get to this, but in some cases, a borrower is going to, you need to look at both programs and see which is the most advantageous. PPP that we will get to next only covers 8 weeks. This EIDL loan covers a period from February 15th through December 21st. So you got to look. And even though one is forgiven and the other isn't, you still want to weigh what the best benefit is for the business and for your employees.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's the website again. There's the customer service number to contact. I do know of several clients who have reached out to customer service. One company that I helped, that was one I actually did their startup financing 4 years ago, had reached out, and I've been assisting, and they asked whether or not, when they could expect to hear something. I said, we don't really know, we're giving broad general guidance of, it can be 3 or 4 weeks. I said, but you can check with customer service, just make sure you have your application number handy. And she did, and she was caller number 1500, but she did get an answer. That, she had not yet been assigned, but they did have her application. So, and then she had checked with someone else who did the same thing and got the same answer. So they are doing their level best to be able to get information out to people. And there's also the address if you want to, written correspondence can go to. Next, please. Resource partners, we've already talked about this. I mean, SBA is there obviously for everybody, and we're doing our best to help them through the SBDCs. SCORE is fully on board. They're helping people, women's business centers, veterans organizations, chambers of commerce, the economic development economic development centers are also available. And then there's a spot on the SBA website that talks about local assistance. You can go there to check, who else is out there to help. And then you're the nearest small business development center, it's America's SBDC, or you can go on the PA SBDC website as well to find the center closest to you, or who covers your county, basically. This is the actual application. Now, these are all screenshots because it's the only way that it was possible to put together slides for it, because you have to complete each section of information before you can move to the next section. So keep that in mind. This first page is all the disclosures and some of the initial eligibility questions that you will be asked to answer. And then you'll move through each of these sections actually pretty quickly. Next, please, Chris. So this is the first one. You have to pick one of these. If you can't pick one of these and say, yep, this is my business, then you probably are not eligible for this program. Next, please. And then the other disclosures. Now, keep in mind, I always point this out. Questions on SBA forms, for as long as I've been doing them, are typically written sort of backwards. So you make sure you read the questions and you are answering appropriately. So in order to be eligible, you're going to need to be able to check off all of these boxes and say, for example, I'm not in the business of lobbying. You're not a government, you're not engaged in any illegal activity. So you want to be able to answer each one of those before you can proceed. And if you don't, what happens is that bottom button that says continue, it'll be gray and you won't be able to click on it. Next, please. Second section of the application is the business information. Pretty straightforward stuff. What's the business's legal name? What's the trade name? If you don't have a trade name, it's none. And then you're going to do, depending on the type of entity, you're going to either put an EIN number or a social security number in. And each separate EIN, would be eligible to apply. So, and we'll get into that in the next little bit. But basically, if say a parent company has 3 different entities with a separate EIN, each one of those could apply, allowing for affiliation rules, which we'll talk about a little bit. So that asks for the type of organization. It's asking if it's a nonprofit. And then the next slide, please. And then they just are asking for, then if, what is your gross revenue? What are your cost of goods sold the 12 months prior to January 31st? Do you have any rental properties? Are there any lost rents due to this situation? So that can be, sometimes a business rents out some of the space where their business is housed. Those lost rents could be counted. Also, apartment rentals can be counted. Now, developers are not eligible for it, but the little guy that does this, yes. Nonprofits are eligible. So same thing, you're going to put in the cost of operations for the prior 12 months. And then your operating expenses for if it's a secular social services provided by faith-based companies or organizations, you would put in there. And then a list of the secular social services. Now, when they're talking about secular social services, they're talking about daycares and maybe a church owns a daycare or something like that. But the churches are eligible, so, that's a good thing. Any other resources, any other compensation from any other sources that you would have received as a result of the disaster. There are a lot of local organizations offering some assistance. The state has a program that's closed now, but they were running a loan program. So if you've gotten assistance from anywhere else, you need to disclose it here. Next, please. Other compensation, they're asking, where does that come from? So that goes with that last one. Then the primary business address, it can't be a PO box. This must be the physical location of the business. And then business telephone, and down further, it's going to ask you for a website, an email address rather. Make sure those are accurate because that's how they're going to contact you. Pardon me. Next, please. And then there's the email, and then the date the business is established versus the current ownership. Many businesses are sold over the years, sometimes several times. So they're asking for the original date that the business actually opened versus when you've taken ownership of the business. And then what is the business activity? These next two are drop-down boxes. You just have to select what fits best for you. And then the number of employees. All right, now we're in the business owner information, and we're going to talk about this two different ways because this application doesn't work well for nonprofits, but it's what the SBA has, and they had to kind of adapt to make it work for whoever is eligible to apply. So first I'm going to talk about the business owners' personal information, and then we'll talk about the nonprofit as well. So this is where I kind of alluded to this already. Business owner information. Is your business owned by a business entity? And what that means is, does your business have a parent company, if you will? So, and that often happens where a parent company might actually have 3 separate businesses under it with separate EIN numbers. And the reason they're asking for that is because of eligibility, because they're going to look at a combined either employee count or net profit and net worth calculation in order to determine eligibility. So basically, as long as you have fewer than 500 employees when you include all of the other entities, and it doesn't have to be just under a parent company. The eligibility, except for there's certain industries that are eligible, they waived the eligibility requirement or the affiliation rules for hotels, restaurants, and SBA approved franchises. But if you were other than that, what you're going to do is look at either less than 500 employees on a combined basis. So whether it's a parent company or an individual owner who has an interest in another company where they own, 51% or even less than that, but they have an affiliation with the applicant. So you're going to look at either total employees for both or however many there are on a combined basis. If it's less than 500, they'd be eligible. Or the alternative is 15 million combined net worth or 5 million average net income combined over a 2-year period on an average. So that's how they look at that. But that's one of the reasons they're asking for this. So we'll go down to the next. So here's the owner's name, the percentage of ownership, what's the title, how much ownership is there, do you have? And then your social security number, all the basic personal information. And then we'll go down to the next slide. There we go.
Marcia.
Yeah.
I just want to add for nonprofits, faith-based organizations that don't have an owner, you're going to put information on the director, the chief financial officer, someone who has the authority to act on behalf of the organization.
What we've been telling people is whoever has fiduciary responsibility for the organization should fill this out. We understand that the application has not been designed for nonprofits. They had to work with what they had because this all happened so quickly. And nonprofits typically are not eligible for SBA loans. So that's why this is more difficult. This is just a way to get it into the system. It's a way to, because if you don't fill this information out, you can't proceed in the application. but you will have already indicated that you're a nonprofit on the application. So when the account loan officer gets to it, he's going to realize that. So what they're ultimately going to need probably is a resolution from the board of directors allowing the nonprofit to receive the funds. There's very little documentation on these loans. Now back to if it's a for-profit business and there are additional owners who own 20% or more, you click on that add additional owner and fill out the information for each additional owner who has 20% or more. Next, please. Now you're in additional information. And the nonprofits need to answer this too. So think individual who's filling it out for the nonprofit. But on these questions, you need to be able to answer no. If you can't answer no, you may not be, eligible. Although they have even loosened some of these. I read the other day that if you have something that's remote in time, like for that first one where it asks if you've been convicted of a criminal offense, even if it's a felony that's more than 5 years old, they've been accepting those applications. So, which I find that interesting. If you're debarred from doing business with the government, you can't receive a federal loan. So in other words, if you've defaulted on a previous SBA loan or any other federal debt, student loans, anything like that, you would not be eligible unless the government has been made whole and you've paid back anything that would have been a loss to the government. Next, please. This is asking if anybody helped you with the application and whether or not there was a fee charged. You want to disclose that. Do you want that person to be able to answer questions with regards to the application? So you have to make that decision. And then this is the blocks where you check off that you would like to be considered for up to the $10,000 advance. Next, please. And then they need a place to deposit the funds. So you're going to give them the name of the bank, the account number, and the routing number. And for those of you who don't know what a routing number is, on the bottom of your check, all the way to the left is a first series of numbers. That's the routing number. That's what identifies the bank. And then all the disclosures, and you're certifying that the above information, everything that you provided, is true and correct. And that is very, very important. You don't want to lie to the federal government. It's not pretty when you do that. They will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law if you are knowingly making fraudulent statements or anything like that. May not be tomorrow, may not be next week, but they will come after you, I promise. Because these are tax dollars being used for this program. They want to make sure that that they're being used appropriately. So that's very, very important. And trust me, these applications are based on your input. So they are relying entirely on the input you are giving them. Next, please. And this is just a summary page. It allows you to go down through. This is all the information you provided earlier in the application. If something isn't right, click the edit button. It'll take you back to that section. You can fix it and then come back. So just be very careful. I've had quite a number of calls where somebody says, oh, gee, I know I made a mistake on the application. Can I go back and fix it? No. Once you've submitted it, you can't get it back. You just have to wait for a loan officer to contact you. One thing I don't know is whether the customer service, if they could handle mistakes in previous applications. I have my doubts, but if either—
I would wait for a loan officer to make those modifications.
Okay, thanks, Kim. That's kind of what we've been saying, but it's good to hear it from one of you too. And then at the bottom, you have to click I'm not a robot, and then hit the submit button, and you are done until you hear from somebody. There's
Marcia.
Yes.
I just want to add that you will get an application number, and
yes,
we encourage people to either do a screenshot with that application number or take your cell phone and take a photo of it. So you have that application number should you call customer service or email them. It'll be a really quick and easy way for that representative to reference your account.
Thanks, Sonia. I forgot about that one. I've been saying that all along, but that's good. Glad you brought that up. Okay, now that was the EIDL program. That's the loan you have to pay back if you get it. This one, now we're starting on the small business paycheck protection program. So this is an entirely different program. This one is designed to be self-liquidating. So it's designed to be more of a grant, but that's with proof of using the funds appropriately. So we're going to run through this one. It's a loan. It actually is classified as a loan. Now this one is done through the lenders. So if you have an existing SBA lender that if your bank does SBA lending, that's where I would start. If they don't do SBA lending, you want to maybe check and make sure they haven't actually signed up recently to do these loans. Right there is where you can find who is an SBA lender, whether it be temporary or permanent. So you can go to the SBA website to find a list of who is participating in this program. And then this program is designed primarily for payroll, to basically keep workers on the payroll who were on before this whole thing started, or to bring them back in order to be able to pay them. I'm getting a lot of questions about, well, gee, if I get this approved, can I use it 6 months from now when when I bring my workers back? No, the whole point is for you to bring your workers back on payroll, whether or not there is a physical place for them to go to do work or not. They can be sitting in their house where everybody's supposed to be right now and be back on your payroll. So that's in it, but it's only for an 8-week period. So, and our understanding is that once you apply and you become approved for the loan, the lender must disperse these funds within 10 days. So that was a recent directive that we got. So
Marcia.
Yes, ma'am.
And then just to add on to it, so once the business receives their first disbursement, that's when the clock starts on the 8 weeks.
Right, absolutely. So, keep that in mind. These are starting to be approved. So you're going to have to make a decision, because you can't double dip either. You can't, if you applied for payroll under EIDL and you got approved for EIDL and then you get approved for this, you can't use it for the same purposes. So, this one, like I said, is primarily for payroll. 75, they want you to use at least 75% of the funds under the PPP program for payroll costs. And that can include all the benefits that you were paying as well. You can use up to 25% to pay interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. These are available right now. In fact, the contractors, now that it's April 10th, everybody who is eligible to apply, even contractors and self-employed. Now, when I say contractors, think 1099. So basically, if you have, say you're a 1099 employee working for a specific company, that company cannot apply on your behalf, but you are eligible to apply on your own as a 1099 employee. And then self-employed people as well, anybody basically files a Schedule C in their personal, as far as self-employed or sole proprietors. Next, please. Under this program, the maximum loan amount is up to $10 million, and the interest rate is 1%. The first payment is deferred for 6 months, and the loan maturity is 2 years. So what it's designed to do is self-liquidate with proper documentation, copy of payroll. Even if you use a payroll company, you have a payroll record you're sending to that company, along with transferring the funds that the payroll company needs to pay the employees. You need proof of those two things. So think complete paper trail. I'm fond of saying, if it isn't documented, it never happened. So keep that in mind with this. That is critically important. If there is a residual at the end where you have used funds that in a way that you shouldn't have used them, there will be a residual loan at the end that will have to be paid back. But for everything you have documentation for that was an eligible use of proceeds, you're going to take that information to the bank and the bank is going to submit it to SBA and say, SBA, please pay down this loan or provide funds to me of this amount to pay down this loan. It's designed to be entirely forgiven by the end of the disbursements, within, I think it's 60 days, I want to say, of that submission, that they should have it all paid up. And even if there is interest accruing at just at 1%, but there's interest accruing on any outstanding balance, if the loan is forgiven, that interest is paid by the SBA to the bank. So you won't even have residual interest unless there is a residual loan, and then you're going to owe the interest and the other interest that was accruing as well. There are no collateral requirements. This loan requires no collateral. I unfortunately had a call from one of the centers in the state with a borrower saying that the bank was insisting on additional collateral. They're not supposed to do that. And I did run that up the flagpole with the folks from SBA, and they agreed with that they shouldn't be taking collateral. It's not required. And there are no personal guarantees as well. Same situation there. They can't do something they're not supposed to do under this program. The banks have 100% guarantee on this loan if it becomes a loan. They shouldn't need anything beyond that. As long as they are doing their part and, you know, making sure they're getting the documentation and handling things appropriately, they will be repaid, even if this thing goes bad. There are no guarantee, no fees to be paid to the SBA or to the lender. The lender is not to charge fees on this thing either. And this program, as I may have mentioned, is only available up through June 30th, and then it goes away. So this is meant to be a short-term fix, primarily for payroll. Next slide, please. Here, I've already said this, it'll be forgiven if at least 75% of the funds are used for payroll with proper documentation. There, I said it again. Forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. So basically, who is eligible to apply for the PPP? Small businesses with 500 or fewer employees, nonprofits, veterans organizations, faith-based organizations. The nonprofits under this one are a little more limited. I think it is just the 501c3s that are eligible under the PPP.
And 501c19, that is the
that's right,
IRS
veterans.
definition for the veterans works.
That's the veterans, right. Sole proprietors are eligible, self-employed people are eligible. Independent contractors, again, think 1099, are also eligible. Next, please. Here's the reasons you might owe money when the loan is due. If the borrower uses the loan amount for anything other than payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, utility payments over the 8 weeks after receiving the loan, you could owe money if you don't handle this appropriately. If the borrower uses less than 75% of the loan amount for payroll costs, they're going to owe money. If borrower maintains staff and payroll at less than the February 15th, 2020 levels, you will owe money if that's the case. So there are some of the reasons you might have a loan at the end. To qualify for the loan forgiveness, you're going to have to maintain the full-time employee headcount and salaries and wages at those previous levels. And you have until June 30th to restore full-time employment and salary levels from any changes made between February 15th and April 26th. So you need to do it pretty quickly so that, you know, as I just said, once this loan is made, or once you're approved, the lender only has 10 days to begin the disbursements, and that starts the 8-week period. So you want to get people back in time so that they can fully benefit from this. Next, please. What counts as payroll costs? Pretty much everything. Salaries, wages, commissions, even tips for waitresses and waiters who have lost tips in restaurant industry. Employee benefits include vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowances for separation or dismissal. So if you've been let go permanently instead of just temporarily, and they give you some kind of a severance, that would be eligible. Payments required for group health care benefits, including the insurance premiums, are eligible. Payments for any I'll call it any normal retirement benefit are also eligible. What counts as payroll costs for sole proprietors and independent contractors? We've gotten this question a lot. So if you actually take a wage, that would be eligible, or pay wages, that would be eligible. Any commissions, income, or net profit, basically, on your Schedule C would be eligible. Next, please.
Marcia.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add that for the salary, wages, commissions, or tips, the maximum is $100,000 per person annualized.
Good point. I missed that one. That's true. And that's true for, yeah, even the corporations and things. If it's 100,000, that you can only count up to $100,000 in the calculation. All right, Ernie, no questions at this point. And we'll keep going. All right.
We do have one here from Tom. Could I have some clarification if an LLC is being taxed as a sole proprietor, that the net earnings can be used for the PPP along with wages?
I missed part of that first part of that question.
Yeah, so just he's seeking clarification. If an LLC is being taxed as a sole proprietor, the question is, can the net earnings be used for the PPP along with wages?
Net profit, and if they're paying wages to someone, yes. So it would be the net profit plus any employee, if they have employees, any other employee wages. Okay. So the net profit would be the owner's, what we would expect, that's what's available to the owner as income.
Great. And then he has a second part to that. If the LLC is being taxed as an S Corp, only payroll can be used for the PPP with 1,000, with K1s not applicable. That's a question.
Yeah, the LLCs, the K1s, now here's how that works. What I've been told is that as long as the K1 is not passive income, in other words, if the owners are receiving a K1, but that's how they're compensated, but they're the ones running actually the day-to-day operation of the business, that K1 can be used. But if they are just passive investors in the business and aren't actually working in the business, then no, the answer is no.
Okay, one more here, thank you. Do we list an owner who owns 15% of the company? Or just those over 20%?
Oh, wait a minute. I guess that's with regards to the application. No, initially they're just asking for anybody owning 20% or more. They may come back and ask you for the full ownership. We just don't happen to know how deep they're going on some of this.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, all right. Now we're going to do a quick recap of the two programs side by side. This is in an effort to help you maybe keep them straight. Trust me, it took me a little while to keep them straight too, and I still get confused once in a while. So EIDL is on the left, PPP is on the right. So who is the lender? Under EIDL, as we said, it's the SBA, pardon me, with the funds coming directly from the US Treasury. Under PPP, it's the bank. It's anybody who does SBA 7A loans this is underwritten, basically, there is really no underwriting, but just based on some information you provide to the bank. What's the maximum loan amount? Under EIDL on the left, it's up to $2 million with up to a $10,000 advance that is done not within 3 days, but more quickly than you would actually receive the rest of the loan funds. And you're not required to pay that back if you're declined or even if you decide not to take the loan. On the PPP program, maximum loan amount is $10 million. And it's based on roughly 2.5 times the average monthly payroll costs over the previous 12 months. Now, the reason they do that is because you're allowed to, since it's only a period of 8 weeks, it's actually more than that, so that it works out that that other portion ends up being, once you deduct payroll, ends up being about 25% that can be used for other than the payroll and the payroll, any of the expenses associated with the payroll. And then the annual interest rate is 3.7, this is EIDL, the first one, 3.75% for for-profit businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. On the PPP program, any residual amount that becomes a loan, it is 1% interest on anything that's not forgiven. Loan term for the EIDL loan on the left is up to 30 years. For the PPP program, it is a payment period of 2 years. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's another good reason to make sure you're documenting everything properly so that this loan can be forgiven. Because a 2-year term, even at 1% interest, can be a lot of money and a lot of cash flow for a small business. So that's why there are some cases where I'm looking at and comparing where I'm helping individuals and I'm going, you know, here are the 2 parameters. Where do you think your greatest need is going to be? And while the PPP is very attractive because it's totally forgiven, in some cases, the EIDL loan just might make more sense because it is for a period up to 30 years to repay it at, even though it's an interest rate of 3.75%, it still will stretch your cash flow. And most of the businesses are really going to need that cash flow for a period of time after this is over to get the business back in a healthy position. So you might be better off with that one, but you have to decide which makes the most sense for you. Now, when is the first loan payment due? Here's another good reason. The EIDL loan has a 1-year deferment. So interest accrues during that deferment, but you have up to 30 years to pay it back. On the PPP loan, the deferment is for at least 6 months. And then if the loan is forgiven, the interest that accrues during the deferment is paid by SBA to the bank. How can you use the loan proceeds? Under EIDL, operating expenses that could have been met had a disaster not occurred for a period between February 15th and December 21st. So that's a much longer time frame than the PPP. So again, here it might make more sense. Plus they'll allow, you know, in addition to payroll, more of your other operating expenses under that program. Under the PPP, again, it's primarily payroll, and then they will allow up to 25% for obligations that were in place prior to February 15th. What collateral for the EIDL? It's just a UCC filing, even in a subordinate position behind any existing bank debt on business assets. There's no real estate, either commercial or personal real estate. So it's just a blanket UCC filing. And under PPP, there is no collateral at all. And for EIDL, personal guarantees are required for anybody owning in excess of 20% or more of the business. For loans over $200,000. Thank you, Chris. I keep forgetting to change that afterwards. On the PPP loan, there are no personal guarantees. Is this a loan forgiveness program? EIDL? No, it has to be repaid, but again, have an extended period to pay it. Under PPP, it is a loan forgiveness program as long as you spend the money appropriately over that 8-week period and you have proper documentation to give to the bank. It will be eligible for forgiveness. The EIDL loan, what reduces forgiveness? Nothing, it's a loan. And then we already actually touched on this under PPP. If it won't be forgiveness or fully forgiven, at least if you reduce your full-time employee headcount, And it could also be reduced to the extent that compensation for any individual making less than 100%, $100,000 a year is reduced by more than 25%. And remember, there is that $100,000 cap per employee to use as part of the calculation. And you have until June 30th to restore your full-time employment at salary levels for any changes made between February 15, 2020 and April 26, 2020. And they're asking about tax returns. Do we need 2019 tax returns? No. If they require a tax return and you don't have 19 yet, they'll accept 18. Maybe, again, we don't even know if they're asking for additional information. And the same thing under PPP, they're not requiring 2019. How long will the loan application take? That's anybody's guess at this point. I know we've been saying 3 or 4 weeks, and it seems like it is taking that long. So be patient one more time. They have a lot of applications. The PPP loans are being approved very quickly. Basically, as soon as the lender submits the applications through an electronic portal, they pretty much instantly have a loan number assigned to it. So, you know, the onus for that actually, and the answers and all the questions and the information provided falls back on the borrower to provide accurate and truthful information. Both programs are fully active now. You can apply for either one or both, but you just remember you can't use the funds. No double dipping, basically. So you can only use, like for payroll, you either got to select PPP or EIDL. What entities can apply? Affiliation, we've already talked about the affiliation, but basically EIDL is up to 500 employees or the alternative standard based on net income and tangible and net worth of the company. PPP is primarily anybody who has 500 or fewer employees. There are some exceptions that allow for more than that. They're far and few between. If you're in doubt, look up your NAICS code and to make that determination. Who can apply? Under EIDL, it's all for-profit businesses and most nonprofits. Under PPP, it's anybody with 500 or fewer employees, and it's for all businesses that are, at least that are eligible. There are, as you saw, a handful of businesses that are not eligible for SBA financing, but it includes nonprofits, veterans organizations, tribal concerns, sole proprietorship, self-employed individuals, and independent contractors with 500 or fewer employees. And that is about it. All right. Sonia or Kim, did anything critical that you think I missed? Oh, they might have jumped off. They had a 10 o'clock appointment that they had to get to. So they probably, I don't see them now. So I don't know. So,
Yep,
yeah.
yep, that's that is all. Ernie's jumped off the call as well. I just
Okay.
want to make a quick statement about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Cyber criminals thrive in an environment where there's chaos and confusion, where there are more questions than answers, and that, I think, characterizes the present moment. To help keep you safe, I'd like you to try to remember the acronym BS. In this case, I mean be skeptical. Be skeptical of any communications that you receive, be it email, text message, phone call purporting to be from the SBA or a lender trying to follow up about an application or offering help. I would encourage you to bookmark the SBA site and your lender site and interact with those sites using those bookmarks rather than following links in text messages or emails. If you do receive an email, scrutinize from the sender very carefully. It should be coming from @sba.gov or from your lender. If you have any doubts about the authenticity of the email that you get, I'd encourage you to send that along to an SBDC consultant for their review, or you can send it to me. My address is info@pasbdc.org. and I'd be happy to take a look and help you make a determination. If you do send along an email to us, I ask that you not send along any attachments. We want to continue to preserve your security and privacy. I won't need those attachments in order to determine if the email is in fact from the person who it purports to be. All right, again, be skeptical and be very careful about who you interact with on these matters. Thanks.
All right, I guess that's, that, excuse me, kind of concludes everything. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for your help. And just, you know, if you have questions, as we said, you know, there's lots of help out there. And with that, I guess we're finished for today. And I want to thank you all for your participation, and be safe and have a great day.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.